Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a quiet homeowner refuses to join a power-hungry HOA, he sparks an all-out war over land, freedom, and control. Bulldozers, forged documents, and secret plans collide in this gripping tale of defiance, justice, and one man who refused to back down. I've always believed that peace and privacy weren't luxuries, they were necessities. That's why 3 years ago, I bought the corner lot house on Silver Pine Drive. It was one of the few remaining properties in the area not swallowed up by the ever-expanding reach of the Silver Pines Estate HOA. It came with a title, a plot, and most importantly, freedom. Freedom from newsletters about mailbox colors, from surprise violations about grass height, from being told what kind of flowers I could plant on my own damn porch. And for 3 years, it was perfect. I'm not exaggerating when I say I loved that backyard more than some of my relatives. I designed every square foot of it myself. The cherry trees along the west fence were my pride. Planted by hand, fertilized with compost, I made myself, each one trained to arch naturally and bloom in cascade. The grass was a thick velvet emerald, trimmed weekly, but never scalped like the HOA-mandated buzz cuts on the other side of the block. I built a wooden deck by the back entrance, framed it with solar string lights, and mounted a sturdy grill beside a round jacuzzi sunk into custom-laid pavers. That backyard was where my wife and I had drinks after putting the kids to bed, where my son learned to ride his bike, where my daughter buried her first time capsule in a cookie tin. It wasn't just land. It was mine. So when I saw 3 people approaching my front gate on a Tuesday morning, clipboards in hand and artificial smiles locked and loaded, I knew trouble was coming. The first to speak was a thin woman with severe hair and sunglasses that looked surgically attached to her face. "Good morning. You must be Mr. Holloway. I'm Cheryl James, Vice Chair of the Silver Pines Estate Homeowners Association. This is Brad, our landscaping design consultant, and this is Karen." Of course, her name was Karen. I didn't need the rest of the introduction. Karen nodded like a monarch, acknowledging a peasant. "We're here with exciting news, Mr. Holloway," she said, already pulling a folded map from a manila envelope. "The HOA has initiated a beautification program to enhance neighborhood consistency and promote environmental cohesion. We're installing decorative trees along the perimeter of our community. According to our mapping system, your yard is in Zone 7, which is scheduled for 6 ornamental installations. Brad, show him the layout." Brad handed me a glossy paper with a computer-rendered mock-up of what appeared to be my backyard, only with random trees slapped in the middle of my grill, my garden beds, and, incredibly, through the center of the damn jacuzzi. They had even labeled the jacuzzi as removable feature. I took a deep breath. "You do know I'm not part of your HOA, right?" Karen's smile didn't budge. "Well, yes, technically your lot is outside the original boundary lines. But this initiative is about unifying the community. Visual harmony doesn't stop at paper lines. It's about spirit." "Spirit doesn't give you permission to touch my property," I said. "And your map? It's a fantasy." Cheryl tried a softer angle. "We've already acquired the trees, Mr. Holloway. Flowering dogwoods, quite expensive. We'd hate for the community to pay for assets that go unused." "Not my community," I said. "Not my trees." "Not my problem." I could feel my pulse rising, but I kept my voice steady. "Look, I understand you have plans, but you don't have jurisdiction over my land. That was verified when I bought the place. Deed, plat, legal parcel lines. I don't pay your dues. I don't answer to your board. And I sure as hell didn't agree to let you drop 6 trees into my backyard like it's a game of SimCity." Karen blinked once, then pursed her lips. "We'll note your stance," she said coolly. "But I think in time you'll see the benefit of cooperating with your neighbors." They left a rolled-up copy of the planting schedule on my welcome mat like a parting gift. I tossed it in the recycling bin before it touched the tile. That evening, over dinner, I told my wife what happened. She rolled her eyes and said, "I knew this was coming the day we moved in next to that HOA." We both laughed it off. I cracked a beer and watched the sun set from the deck while the jacuzzi bubbled beside me. The next day, we had a family outing planned. Nothing fancy, just downtown errands, haircuts for the kids, a gift run for my mother-in-law's birthday, and a late lunch at the diner the kids liked. We were gone most of the day. I locked the gates before we left. The yard was pristine when we pulled out of the driveway. When we came back, nothing was the same. The moment we turned onto Silver Pine Drive, I felt it. That gut squeeze. That inexplicable tightening in your chest that tells you something's wrong before your brain catches up. At first, it was small things. The back gate, which I know I had latched shut with the carabiner and chain, was hanging open like a lazy invitation. There were fresh tire marks on the side street, thick and gouged like something heavy had rolled in. And then, as we pulled into the driveway and I stepped out of the car, I rounded the corner into the backyard, and I froze. It looked like a construction site after a bad thunderstorm. My lawn was gone. Not dug up, gone. Scraped away, like someone had peeled the turf off with a shovel the size of a car. Dirt churned into mud, beds of vegetables shredded and trampled into mush. My cherry trees. One was knocked sideways, its roots exposed like broken limbs. The others had been marked with orange flags. One had a splintered branch dangling, still half attached, like some kind of botanical crime scene. The deck had been partially cordoned off with caution tape. What the hell for? I didn't know. Maybe to protect the future victims from tripping over my dislodged grill, which had been moved. Not just bumped, moved. But the worst, the part that made my skin go cold, my jacuzzi. It was on its side. They had pulled it, torn it, out of the foundation I had installed myself. You could still see the crumbled pavers and ripped electrical conduit where the base had been. It now sat in the dirt like some monument to idiocy and entitlement, wires dangling like dead snakes. That was the moment something in me snapped. My wife came around the corner with the kids and let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a scream. My daughter clutched my arm and whispered, "Dad, what happened?" I didn't have an answer. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The dispatcher kept her voice calm as I described the destruction. She asked if I had seen anyone enter the property. I told her we'd been gone all day, that we'd returned home to find the entire yard dismantled like it had been prepped for a mass burial. She assured me an officer would be there soon. I hung up and kept pacing like a caged animal, fists clenched, trying to breathe. 10 minutes later, my neighbor Eli walked up with his daughter Ava. She looked a little pale, clutching a melting popsicle. "She wanted to tell you something," Eli said, his voice low. Ava looked up at me with big eyes. "Earlier today, there was a big yellow tractor, I think it was a bulldozer," she said, "and a white van with the tree logo. They opened your gate and went in. The men had those bright jackets and were sticking flags in the ground." I crouched down to her level. "Did you see what they did?" "They took your hot tub," she said solemnly. "And there were trees in the truck. Pretty ones. They didn't plant them, though. Just left them." My jaw clenched so hard I felt a tooth click. The responding officer showed up shortly after, a tall man with mirrored sunglasses and an expression that suggested this wasn't his first HOA-related nightmare. He walked the property with me, taking notes and snapping photos. He didn't say much until we got to the jacuzzi. "Sweet Jesus," he muttered, crouching beside the ripped wiring. "They moved this thing how?" "With a death wish, apparently," I said. "They damaged the foundation. These were professionally poured pavers. There's exposed electrical down there. If a kid had touched this." He nodded and pulled out a body cam. "All right, this qualifies as destruction of private property, potential criminal trespass, possibly endangerment depending on the wiring. You said this was the HOA?" "Silver Pines," I said. "They came by yesterday with a landscaping plan. I told them no. They smiled and walked away. Now this." He raised an eyebrow. "They didn't have any written authorization to be here." "Written? They didn't have legal authority, period. I'm not even in their goddamn HOA." He nodded slowly. "That's important, very important. Let me file this properly. I'm going to need to write up an incident report. You'll want to get legal counsel." "Already got one in mind," I said. "And I want every inch of this documented. Photos, notes. Hell, draw me a chalk outline of the hot tub if you have to." He actually smirked. "Understood." As he walked the perimeter, I looked again at what used to be my sanctuary. The chaos, the arrogance. Someone had decided that my yard didn't matter, that my refusal was an inconvenience to be bulldozed. Literally. That night, I called Ashley Caldwell. She picked up on the second ring, cool and calm as ever. "Matt," she said, "you sound like a man whose rights have been violated." "They ripped out my goddamn backyard," I replied. "That enough of a case for you?" She let out a slow whistle. "Tell me everything, and send me photos." We're going to make someone very uncomfortable. I didn't know yet just how far this was going to go, but I knew one thing. War had been declared, and they picked the wrong damn architect. When people talk about the calm after the storm, they never mention the part where the storm files paperwork against you. The morning after the backyard massacre, while we were still trying to sweep loose pavers into sad, uneven piles, a man in a cheap suit walked up to my porch like he was delivering flowers. He handed me an envelope stamped with the Silver Pines Estate HOA emblem, a pine tree with roots shaped suspiciously like grasping fingers. "Have a good day," he said, already turning away. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from the HOA's legal representative, full of phrases like miscommunication on homeowner consent and pre-approved voluntary participation. Then I saw the attachment, a permission form, with my name and my signature. Except it wasn't my signature. It was like someone had taken my actual handwriting, blended it in a blender, then drawn it with the wrong hand. The date said 2 months ago, long before anyone had knocked on my door with tree propaganda. I just stared at the page for a long second, pulse pounding in my ears. Then I laughed, a short, ugly laugh that startled even me. "Oh, look," I muttered, "a magic signature. I must have signed this with my telepathic pen while sleeping." I immediately forwarded photos of the document to Ashley. She called me back almost before the last image sent. "That signature is a joke," she said, voice sharp. "They forged consent. This isn't just trespassing anymore. This is fraud." She paused. "Matt, do not respond to them directly. I'll handle communication from here." Before lunch, she had already drafted and filed a temporary injunction request, a legal stay the hell away from my property order, and informed the HOA's attorney they were potentially facing criminal charges. Meanwhile, Ashley's private investigator, a retired cop named Nolan, began digging into the bulldozer situation. Later that day, he called with his first discovery. The machinery was rented by a contractor called Evergreen Earthworks, he said. "You're gonna love this. They've been sued before. Similar situation, unauthorized landscaping on private land." He let that hang a moment. "And get this, the bulldozer's onboard GPS logs show it was parked behind your house from late morning to mid-afternoon yesterday." "GPS?" I repeated, savoring the word. "Yep, tech doesn't lie. People do." I almost wished Karen were there so I could deliver that line to her face. By mid-afternoon, I received another letter, printed in the same smug font as the first. This time, the HOA doubled down. According to the letter, my property fell within the natural sphere of the Silver Pines Visual District, and therefore reasonable beautification measures were justified. Visual District, beautification measures. They made destruction sound like a spa treatment. The final line nearly made me choke. "We expect your full cooperation in maintaining community standards moving forward." Not a chance in hell. My wife, who had spent the morning holding back tears while picking broken ceramic pieces out of the herb garden, read the letter and whispered, "They know exactly what they did. They think they're untouchable." That was when my son tugged my hand and pointed to something in the yard. A small stake left behind. Orange plastic flag. The letters printed on it read, Zone 7, D planting. D for dogwood. Zone 7. My yard. It was like they'd tagged us for extermination. That night, I sat at the kitchen island while Ashley briefed us over speakerphone. "They want intimidation," she said. "They want you to fold. They think you're one more homeowner terrified of the HOA board." "Well," I said, staring at the wreckage beyond the glass door, "they mistook me for someone who gives a damn about their imaginary kingdom." Ashley chuckled, the kind of chuckle lawyers make when smelling a blood-soaked victory. "Good," she said, "because this is far beyond an HOA violation. We are talking falsification of documents, malicious property damage, unlawful entry. We'll file for $300,000 in damages." And that's my conservative number. $300,000. My wife let out a low whistle. Me, I felt something new. Not anger, not outrage. Determination. They forged my permission. They bulldozed my land. They assumed they'd get away with it. I poured myself a whiskey, lifted the glass toward my shredded yard, and whispered, "Round 2. Ashley called me just past 9 the next morning, her tone unusually sharp. "They're not just bullies," she said. "They're playing a long game, and we just got our first real look at the playbook." Her investigator, Nolan, had unearthed something. Turns out the Silver Pines HOA had drafted a document titled the Organic Aesthetic Integration Proposal, A laughable name for something so sinister. It laid out plans to extend visual continuity across property lines not technically under their jurisdiction. The proposal included a spreadsheet, a list, 16 addresses. Mine was number 4. Each property on that list was marked non-member targeted. Their plan? Apply soft influence measures to encourage compliance, which included unsolicited improvements, coordinated neighbor pressure, and demonstrative landscaping installations. Translation: ambush beautification by bulldozer. And guess what? Every one of those lots was legally outside the HOA boundaries. Ashley sent me the files Nolan had found, screenshots of internal emails between board members, including Karen. She'd written phrases like, push the perimeter, build the brand of the neighborhood, and in one particularly damning message, Matt Holloway's lot is critical to the Zone 7 impression. If he resists, take initiative. We'll sort permissions after. Take initiative. They were going to force me into their vision of suburbia, whether I liked it or not, like I was a stubborn lawn that needed mowing. I sat in stunned silence for a moment, then barked out a bitter laugh. They tried to terraform my damn backyard like I'm part of some HOA-themed video game. Ashley didn't laugh. They did it to you to send a message to the others. That's how these things work. They make an example of someone. I wasn't just some random homeowner anymore. I was the opening move in a campaign. So I decided to make myself the campaign's final chapter too. We filed the suit formally that afternoon. $300,000 in damages, broken down into precise categories: landscape restoration, structural repair, replacement of the jacuzzi, cost of private security installation, legal fees, and emotional distress. But the real bomb was the accusation of document falsification and unauthorized access. Meanwhile, Nolan got a call back from a source inside the HOA, anonymous but verified. Apparently, the board was panicking behind closed doors. Karen had insisted on taking control of the situation personally, overruling other members, even threatening to revoke privileges from anyone who spoke out publicly. The source shared a meeting recording from 2 weeks earlier. Karen's voice was unmistakable. We cannot let property lines define community cohesion, she said. If we wait for permission, we lose momentum. People will conform when they see the results. Another voice asked timidly, but what if they don't want to conform? Karen laughed. Then we show them why it's easier to go along. My wife and I listened to that part twice. It wasn't just arrogance. It was ideological. She believed in some weird Stepford ecosystem where aesthetics justified force. That night, we walked the edges of our yard. It looked like a crime scene still. Flags, gouges, one of the trees still lying sideways in its pot like it was ashamed. We paused by the cherry tree closest to the fence, the only one still blooming. My wife touched the petals gently. What kind of person thinks they have the right to do this? I thought about that word, right, and how some people confuse want with entitlement. Karen didn't just want me to comply, she believed I owed it to her. That made this bigger than broken pavers or ruined landscaping. This was about the line, the literal and legal line, between private freedom and community control. Ashley agreed. This isn't just a property case anymore, she said during a late-night call. This is an overreach case, a power test. If they win, if they even stall you long enough, they'll move on to the next homeowner and the next. Then let's make sure I'm the last one on their list, I said. We got to work. By the time the injunction came through, I had memorized the smell of freshly disturbed dirt. It had become the scent of my mornings, a bitter mix of soil, splintered roots, and expensive rage. The judge signed off on the emergency order just before noon that Monday. It barred the Silver Pines HOA from entering, modifying, or making contact with my property in any form under threat of contempt and sanctions. The paperwork was delivered to their headquarters, a converted model home 2 streets over, by a court officer with the kind of satisfaction usually reserved for bounty hunters. Ashley called me 5 minutes later. They've been served, she said. They're officially on a leash. Now we pull. From that point forward, everything became documentation. I took photos daily, logging the progression of the damage like it was a patient in a trauma ward. Every chunk of paver, every busted sprinkler head, every displaced brick from the grill foundation, cataloged and time-stamped. Nolan did his part too. He filed a subpoena request for Evergreen Earthworks' internal communications, and what came back was priceless. An email from their site manager confirming verbal instructions to begin prep work on Parcel 7 from someone listed as K. Matthews, Karen's maiden name. They tried to hide her under a different name. Didn't work. Meanwhile, word started to spread. Other homeowners, particularly those on the HOA's non-member list, began quietly reaching out. Some of them told stories eerily similar to mine. Unsolicited suggestions, flags appearing overnight, unmarked trucks surveying their property lines. None had taken action until now. I had become, against all odds, the accidental ringleader. The local paper caught wind. A reporter named Jewel reached out asking if I'd be willing to go on record. Ashley advised caution. We want the facts to speak, not emotion, but agreed to a brief, controlled statement. Jules published a piece that week titled, "The Grass Isn't Always Greener, HOA Power Clash in Silver Pines." She didn't use the term bulldozer mafia, but I could tell she wanted to. Karen responded the next day with a public letter posted on the HOA website, framing me as aggressively uncooperative and hostile to shared values. She claimed I had verbally agreed to contribute to the Community Beautification Initiative and reneged after materials were procured. She didn't mention the forged signature, the GPS data, or the court order currently stapled to her front gate. Ashley drafted a formal defamation warning within the hour. We had already filed the primary lawsuit, but she began stacking add-ons like a builder laying bricks, property destruction, trespassing, document falsification, fraud, civil conspiracy, emotional distress, and now, reputational harm. Karen might have had a clipboard and a committee, but we had momentum and evidence. Then, late one evening, Nolan called with something new. A source inside the HOA, he said. Anonymous for now, but solid. They're scared, Matt. They're talking about deleting emails, shredding hard copies. The board's been holding closed-door meetings. Karen's pushing hard to frame everything as miscommunication. But a few members are panicking. He paused. One of them forwarded me something. It was a PDF, an internal HOA memo dated 3 months prior. Title, Phase 2 Expansion, External Parcels and Non-Integrating Owners. Non-integrating. Like I was some kind of defective appliance. The memo outlined a timeline. My property was scheduled for demo prep during week 4. Others were listed for minor aesthetic alignment and property line easing. They had a whole Orwellian glossary of euphemisms for trespassing. I showed the document to my wife. She stared at the screen, then looked at me. They weren't just trying to fix the neighborhood, she said. They were planning a quiet invasion. I didn't say anything. I just forwarded it to Ashley. The next day, our court date was confirmed. Preliminary hearing in 2 weeks. I stood in the backyard that night, flashlight in hand, scanning the uneven soil and torn-up roots like a battlefield medic. Zone 7, they'd called it. Like I was a tile on some HOA board game. Well, I'd read the rules now. And I was flipping the board. You could feel it. The shift. Like the moment before a dam breaks. Everyone knows something's coming, but no one wants to be the first to say it out loud. The neighborhood wasn't speaking in whispers anymore. People were getting loud. It started with the email leak. One of the HOA board members, no name, just a burner Gmail account and a timestamp, sent Ashley a zip file titled Mirror Folder. Inside were screenshots, scanned documents, and raw meeting notes. Real insider stuff. There were PowerPoint decks with HOA branding, plans labeled Perimeter Integration, Q2 targets, and one spreadsheet with chilling specificity, homeowner names, compliance scores, risk tiers. Next to mine, a glowing red cell labeled Obstructionist Active. Karen had turned our block into a war map. The files showed she'd personally overseen the forced landscaping initiatives, bypassing board votes by labeling them pilot projects. She'd communicated directly with the contractor, coordinated logistics, and instructed her assistant, Cheryl of course, to expedite Zone 7. One note read, Holloway's yard needs visual suppression. Remove discordant features if possible. Discordant features. She meant my grill, my trees, my family's goddamn hot tub. Ashley's team cross-referenced the files with prior statements made by Karen in her public letter and immediately drafted a formal fraud motion. But the best part, that same day, Jules, the reporter, published a follow-up. Headline, Dictatorship in the Driveway. Leaked docs reveal HOA's covert operations. It went viral locally. Neighborhood Facebook groups exploded. The next door threads were pure fire. Even the city council issued a public statement about the concerning implications for private property rights. Karen, in full meltdown mode, called an emergency HOA meeting that Friday night. I didn't attend, obviously, but Nolan did. Disguised as a proxy for one of the newly defected homeowners, he recorded the whole thing. The video started with Karen at the front of a folding table, pounding a gavel like it was a war drum. "We are under coordinated attack," she barked. "Outside agitators are attempting to dismantle everything we've built." A middle-aged man in a windbreaker raised his hand. "Built? Karen, you forged signatures. You bulldozed a guy's yard," Karen snapped. "He refused to participate. He made us look weak. If we can't protect the look of this community, what do we even exist for?" Cheryl tried to interject. "Karen, the lawsuit." "We'll beat it," Karen growled. "We always do. He's just one man." She didn't know Nolan was recording, and she definitely didn't know that less than 12 hours later, Ashley would be forwarding that footage to the judge. By Sunday, we had filed a supplemental motion attaching the leaked video, the documents, the compliance spreadsheets, the whole rotten skeleton closet. The judge fast-tracked discovery. Karen was subpoenaed for deposition. So was Cheryl. So was the contractor. The neighborhood was turning. People started resigning from the HOA board. 3 of them sent apologies. Literal, formal letters to me. One said, "We didn't know how deep it went." Another confessed they'd been scared to speak out earlier. Then came the bombshell. A group of 5 homeowners filed their own lawsuit, inspired by mine. Same claims. Unauthorized alterations, misrepresentation, coercion. Some had photos. One had video. A time-lapse of a landscaping crew planting trees on her property line at 6:30 a.m. without her consent. We weren't alone anymore. Karen tried one last move. A tone-deaf PR post on the HOA's homepage, citing misunderstandings blown out of proportion by opportunistic litigants. By then, even her allies had gone quiet. That week, as I walked the perimeter of my yard, I saw something I hadn't expected. A group of neighbors. The same ones who used to nod politely and walk past, now stopping to talk. They asked questions, shared their own horror stories. One guy, Barry, I think, said his wife cried when she read the article. She'd thought they were the only ones being harassed. Another neighbor brought cookies, like it was the HOA Apocalypse bake sale. I stood under one of my surviving cherry trees and thought, damn, this was never just about grass or trees. It was about control and how far people like Karen will go when no one pushes back. Now, they were pushing back. And the foundation under Karen's empire, it was cracking. They didn't cuff her right away. Karen walked into the courthouse that morning like she still believed the world would bow to her clipboard. She wore a cream blazer, oversized sunglasses, and an expression that screamed, "How dare you?" Cheryl trailed behind her, holding a binder as thick as a phone book, eyes darting around like she was trying to map exits. The judge looked unimpressed from the first 5 minutes of the hearing. We were there for the preliminary injunction hearing, but everything had changed since the original filing. Ashley came in armed with a war chest of evidence. The forged documents, internal emails, the deposition footage, video from the HOA meeting, even aerial drone shots Nolan had commissioned showing the full destruction of my property, with timestamp overlays. It looked like a before and after of a bombing run. Karen's attorney used some silver-haired guy who clearly regretted taking the case, opened with, "My client's intentions were always in the best interest of the community." The judge raised an eyebrow. Which part? The bulldozer, the forgery, or the part where she instructed others to take initiative on private land? Dead silence. Ashley didn't even need to do much. She let the evidence talk, and boy, did it scream. But the moment the courtroom changed, truly shifted, was when the court clerk confirmed the GPS data on the bulldozer. She read from the exhibit, Machine 22B, Evergreen Earthworks, deployed to Parcel 7 from 11:23 a.m. to 3:48 p.m. Coordinates match GPS boundary of plaintiff's property. The judge turned slowly to Karen. "And you're telling this court that happened without your knowledge or instruction?" Karen opened her mouth, then closed it, then finally said, "We were beautifying the area." He refused to participate in visual cohesion. I heard someone in the gallery actually gasp. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Matthews, this isn't a landscaping disagreement. This is criminal trespass, document fraud, property destruction. This is a coordinated abuse of authority." Karen tried to pivot. He antagonized the board. He refused to be a good neighbor. Ashley stood. Your Honor, being a bad neighbor does not entitle one to deploy heavy equipment on their lawn without consent, unless Ms. Matthews is suggesting we go back to frontier law. The judge ruled that day. The HOA was to cease all operations relating to property enforcement beyond its legal jurisdiction. A forensic audit of their finances was ordered. And Karen, she was referred to the district attorney. That's when the real unraveling began. Within 72 hours, criminal charges were filed. Multiple counts, falsification of documents, conspiracy to commit property damage, and obstruction of justice. Cheryl flipped, classic move, and offered full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. She handed over login access to the HOA's private servers, where investigators found doctored consent forms for 4 other homeowners. Karen was arrested at the next HOA board meeting. She didn't go quietly. According to Nolan, who was there, she shouted about sacrificing for the aesthetic good as the officers let her out in cuffs. 12 years. That's what the DA asked for. Maximum for fraud and felony vandalism, with enhancements for abuse of organizational authority. Her contractor buddy got 5 years probation, a $150,000 fine, and a lifetime ban from doing residential work in Colorado. And the HOA disbanded. After an emergency vote by the remaining members, Silver Pines Estate HOA officially dissolved. The neighborhood was absorbed into a municipal zoning district. No private enforcement. No community guidelines. No visual cohesion committees. Just homes. People started taking down their uniform shutters. Someone painted their door bright orange. A retired vet up the street installed a 20-foot flagpole. For the first time, it looked like a real neighborhood. Imperfect, varied, human. I rebuilt the yard slowly, brick by brick. The jacuzzi was the last thing I reinstalled. I didn't replace it with a newer model. I brought the original back, repaired it, sealed the cracks in the casing, rewired it myself. Not because it was cheaper, because it mattered, because it was mine. And they don't get to take that away from me. Spring came late that year. A dry winter delayed everything. The blooms, the birds, the sense of thaw. But when it finally arrived, it came in bursts. One morning I stepped outside and realized the cherry trees were flowering again, like nothing had ever happened. But something had happened. A few weeks after the HOA dissolved, I received a letter from the city. Nothing ominous, just a notice that my property had officially been removed from the Silver Pines zoning overlay. No more visual integration expectations. No more aesthetic easements. Just me, my land, and the county tax office. I framed the letter and hung it in the garage, right above the gardening tools. The backyard took time to heal. The grass came back slower than I hoped, but steadier. My wife replanted her herb bed with an almost meditative focus, and the kids helped dig out what was left of the contractor's orange utility flags. Every time we found one, we laughed and tossed it into the fire pit. Burned 23 of them. Probably should have kept one for the scrapbook. I ended up buying the empty lot next door. It came on the market 6 months after the HOA collapse. Some investor trying to cut losses on an unsellable property in what was now a rule-free zone. I bought it with part of the settlement. Didn't even negotiate. I tore out the old fencing, leveled the ground, and extended the cherry grove. Now, instead of 5 trees, we have 15. It's not symmetrical. It's not HOA approved. It's beautiful. We added a hammock between 2 trunks and called it the Peace Zone. My daughter claims it's where she'll write her first novel. My son uses it to launch water balloons from terrifying angles. I just like lying there at sunset, watching the sky shift above something I fought for. The media buzz eventually faded. Jules moved on to covering local corruption scandals. Ashley got 3 new high-profile cases from people who'd read about ours. I told her I wanted a quiet life again. She just laughed and said, "Let's hope your next war is about squirrels." Karen. She's serving time at Fremont Correctional. I'm told she's trying to file appeals, claiming selective prosecution. Last I heard, the prison landscaping team reassigned her to kitchen duty. Ironic. No trees to control, just trays. Cheryl vanished. Rumor says she moved to Arizona and started selling crystals online. Fitting. Some of the former HOA board members formed a community garden group. Voluntary only. No bylaws, no power structure, just people and plants. I helped them build raised beds with reclaimed wood. We don't agree on much. Someone tried to plant lavender next to mint, which is a war crime in gardening circles. but nobody tells anyone what color their mulch should be. That's progress. Every now and then, someone knocks on my door. Strangers mostly, people who read about the lawsuit or heard the story through friends. They ask, "How did you win?" And I tell them, "I didn't win. I refuse to lose." There's a difference. Freedom isn't loud. It's not a parade or a declaration. Sometimes it's just a quiet backyard blooming again. No flags, no zones, just roots and peace.